Assalamu alaikum and welcome to In Conversation with me, FEMIDA Kasim. This week we look at a project that began in Cape Town and was motivated by the belief that imagination is the key to a shared future. I found the initiative inspiring and hope it inspires others too. Joining me to share more about the city project is its founder, Zahira Asmal. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the show, Zahira.
Alaikum salam. Thank you.
Zahira, I've heard about your agency initiating a project called See, which aims to bring about equal representation in the public life of South African cities. What I'm curious to know is how you're actually tackling this project and what inspired you to do this.
Well, I'll start with inspiration first. So 5 years ago, I published a series of books called Movement. So I have them here. And I did a series on Cape Town, Johannesburg, and Durban. And while conducting research for the Cape Town edition of the book, I heard from residents as they expressed their sense of underrepresentation. And so it mainly Black and brown residents felt invisible, uninvited, and unacknowledged in the city of Cape Town. And then paradoxically, in instances where they were not ignored, they were made hyper-visible. And so these encounters demonstrated that there's an urgent need to uncover the hybrid aspects of contemporary life in Cape Town. And I wanted to search ways in which we could render their histories and memories and narratives and identities in the public life of the city. And the way that I'm tackling this project, well, I've got a certain methodology with all my projects. It always starts with research. Well, firstly, before the research, it's always curiosity. I'm very curious about cities. I always wonder what makes a city, what makes it special? Why is Johannesburg, Johannesburg? Why is Cape Town, Cape Town? What makes them so different, so unique, and why are people drawn to these spaces? And so with the C project, it was my curiosity about the responses I heard from Black and brown residents, which actually constitute approximately 85% of Cape Town's population. So if 85% of Cape Town's population is saying that they have felt invisible, and not only the people that I researched and had interviews with, but also you can see it from public protests in the city. If they're feeling unrepresented, they have no access to services, if they are feeling ignored, so much so that they are actually taking to streets and toying or protesting or destroying artifacts and buildings, it's obviously a clear indication that these artifacts and buildings were not made in their image. So I conducted research on my own, locally, moving through the cities, moving through Cape Town, but also I realized that Cape Town has a long colonial history. So I also went to Holland to research there. There's a lot of information about Cape Town in the National Archives and various places in Holland. So I conducted research there. And then, of course, collaborating with various people, individuals, as well as institutions, I conduct my research through these collaborations as well. So I'm very curious about cities. I'm also curious about why cities are cities and why towns didn't end up being cities. What is special about them? So this is the reason I created or founded my company, The City, to answer the questions that I was really curious about. And so my methodology that I employ with all my projects is always to start with that curiosity, to ask a question. Why is something a certain way? And with C, I asked, why are the majority of the people in South Africa and in Cape Town in particular, in the instance of this project, a cultural minority? And so I conducted research on my own. I went across the country researching, but also across Cape Town and the Cape, and then internationally. The reason I went abroad is because a lot of the archives on Cape Town's history is actually the National Archive in Holland. So I went to travel to The Hague, Rotterdam, Amsterdam, and other places, and also to create collaboration. So my research also involves collaborating with others because you get really varied and diverse points of view when you research collaboratively. And then my second part of my methodology is to fundraise. Of course, my work is self-initiated. Our work requires money in order for it to take place. And because it's transnational, our events are both local and international. We need money for all of this. And then we create an institutional framework. And because of the C project, the topics that we were engaging in are also global. How to deal with contested histories in post-colonial societies. That does not only engage Cape Town, but all cities that have a colonial history. So in that institutional framework, I created partnerships with South African and Dutch institutions, namely in Holland, Het Nieuwe Institute, the Research Center for Material Culture, and locally UDISA, the Urban Design Institute for South Africa, and the Institute for Creative Arts. We also partnered with the Consulate General of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, and our supporters financially have been Dutch Culture, based in Amsterdam, the Creative Industries Fund, based in Rotterdam, the Goethe Institute in Johannesburg, as well as for the knowledge sharing workshop that we hosted, the Department of Cultural Affairs and Sport. And then we host our activities, whether they're urban design studios, where we bring people transnationally to Cape Town in a kind of workshop setting for an intense week together, where we analyze the histories and memories, and then we produce work and publish the work in order to engage the public. So the final part of our work is to publish the work and to engage. Our work is always accessible, so the public can always engage with it. So also we share our work with professionals, so artists, architects, designers, and others, so they may take this work and improve the way they create form in our cities. And then ultimately we share our work with governments, both locally and internationally, because ultimately they are mandated to making us, with the big task of making our cities. And are they doing it well currently? Are they representing our cities or the populations democratically in our cities? I think not. So we hope that our work influences their work.
Zahira, this research that you had to do going abroad, doing research, you're in South Africa, how long did you basically take to do all of this?
Well, I launched the C initiative in 2017. So far, I mean, the books that I showed you earlier, those projects took me 2 years to do. What I've realized with C, that it was so major, so significant, the topic so deep and so vast, that I decided to keep it as an ongoing project that my agency will run, hopefully collaboratively as we pass time, because I just feel like not enough work is being done currently, but also because the topics are so relevant in not only our society, but international societies as well.
So you were on the ground, you were telling people all these ideas that you have about the cities and the towns. How were they? Were they forthcoming? Were they a bit defensive? How was the response when you were speaking to people you're in South Africa and those abroad?
Yeah, so I think, of course, there are mixed reactions. I think most of all, I get the response of curiosity. Other people are also curious. So although we may not all be historians, people all have, there's one thing that we never leave at the door when we leave home every day, our identity and our culture. We take it with us everywhere. And so whenever I go out, dinner conversations, well, just casual conversations, even hiking here in Cape Town, a lot of people always are curious with the work that I do, whether I'm talking to them formally or informally, people are curious about it. And so the only time I ever get negative responses is when people have, they refuse to believe the history, or they become defensive about apartheid and colonialism. Or they say something like, I wasn't responsible for that. My forefathers were responsible for apartheid and colonialism. And so my response to that is, yes, absolutely. But you are here today and you know the information today. What is your response going to be? And so we engage in that way. Our doors are always open. I don't ever have, brown only, black only, women only events. We invite everyone in because debate is essential in order for us to grow and move forward.
Welcome back. Joining me is the City Project founder, Zahira Asmal. Zahira, you were talking about the SEA project. Can you tell me what's the aim of the SEA project?
Well, with the SEA project, it's really about bringing people together. It's a transnational project that I initiated in 2017. So it's bringing together people from Cape Town's past and present together to discuss and exchange ideas and develop methodologies to bring representational equity to the built landscapes of our cities. So we ask, are all of our histories and memories represented in the public life of the city? And so we engage with that with people locally and internationally, and then formulate ideas to create representation in the public life of our cities.
And is this the city agency's only project at the moment?
No, so I do a number of projects. I mean, so the SEA project is a self-initiated project. It's a project that is run by our agency, but I also have other initiatives. So I've divided my work into kind of four segments. One of them is obviously the projects that I create and that my agency runs over a number of years. And we always conclude them with publications. Then, of course, we do consulting. I'm often, so we do consulting for international governments. Right now, we're working with Holland, but we've also been commissioned by a Swiss foundation to do a project addressing wealth inequality and spatial inequality in South African cities. And of course, I do commissions as well. So some of our commission projects I've done in the past, I've done Bridge to Brazil for South African tourism and Brand South Africa. I was commissioned to do an exhibition called A Nation Under Construction in London. Also to create a design event called Open Design, and also contribute to exhibitions in the Guggenheim and in Johannesburg. And so currently I'm working on the SEA project, as well as this Wealth Inequality Commission that I was telling you about. I can't talk too much about it yet until we launch. And then finally, I have been working on a project in Johannesburg, in Johannesburg's main station, Park Station, which also brings, it's about re-scripting the old station to make it a place of arrival and welcome. And that we've been waiting for some time now for the city of Johannesburg to get the ball rolling to the next steps of the project.
That sounds exciting. When do you foresee that this project actually kicks off?
The Johannesburg one?
Yes.
Oh gosh, we've been working on it for a long time. So we've kicked off some time back. The information is all on our website. We're literally just waiting for the city of Johannesburg to resume their negotiations with the Passenger Rail Association of South Africa for use of the station for our programming and production.
And Zahira, how do you plan to include multicultural historical memories in the SEA project?
And so, so as I said, all our work is collaborative. So part of including various stories and people's points of view and multicultural narratives is to engage collaboratively. So we host knowledge sharing workshops and studios where we bring people together, both locally and internationally. For the local part, we usually have an open call. So my agency, we advertise over our social media and over other platforms through our partners in inviting people in, and we ask them to engage on certain topics with us. Also through our partners, they use their platforms through urban design, architecture, art, performing arts, and so on. And of course, besides hosting events, we publish books and material on our website. So if you visit icu.capetown, you will see there various there's various information and content from people, and that is from my own research, but also collaboration, and finally through our events.
And how do you invite guests? How do you know who to call in to get information from them?
A lot of research. So as I was saying, my methodology, primarily my agency is a research, publishing and placemaking agency. So I focus a lot on research. So my own research, personal research, I'm a researcher, but also, as I said, collaboratively, we work with various partners and interest groups, and we invite them to also share their past research with us. But in other ways, we also commission research for them to do in various parts of the world and then also locally.
Do you have a list so far of whose stories will be captured and which countries will be represented?
So right now we're focusing on the marginal stories, the stories that are not being told in the public discourse of society and South Africa. So we search for them. I have, just moving through public space, you can see which narratives are predominant. And this is why I still call Cape Town a colonial city. We're not doing enough to state that we are in the post-colony. Not through government efforts. I feel like the academic efforts are not being connected to public activities, and certainly they're not mainstream. So often the research that we share, people are hearing it for the first time. And for all these years in our democracy, we should be having more of a public discourse on this research. So we are going to analyze the marginal histories and bring them to the fore in our research. But then also there are a lot of myths of the past that have been told to us. And so how do we deconstruct those myths in order to tell more truths about that history, and then we can memorialize those histories more representatively. So for example, I will give you, which really affected me, for instance, having the heritage and the history that I have. I was writing an essay called Visibility and Voice in the Creole City. I was commissioned by a Dutch institution in Amersfoort. They had an exhibition called Tell Freedom, and they asked me to write an essay. And I contributed this essay. And it was while I was researching for this essay that I discovered that the Indian history, for instance, in South Africa started all those 300 years ago. So Jan van Riebeeck and the Dutch people had enslaved Indonesian and Indian people and had brought them in chattel slavery in Cape Town. And so most people, most Indian people, believe that their history started with the British in sugarcane plantations and through being shop owners and traders in the 19th century. But that the history extends further than that. So some of the first woman landowner in the Cape was a woman named Angela from Bengal. And her daughter, Anna de Koning, was an owner of a very famous wine estate called Groot Constantia. So there's a lot of the history that we don't know. And so also the architecture that is known to be Dutch, Cape Dutch architecture was also influenced by Indonesians. And so we also believe that enslaved people were just dehumanized black bodies in servitude. But they were also people that were artisans and people that created the spatial and the design elements of the cities that you see today. And yet the colonial record only attributes that architecture and that beauty to Dutch and white people, which isn't true. So the SEA project will bring those histories not to push any agenda forward, but to rather give information so you can take what you want from it and create your own narratives for the cities that you come from.
Zahira, just hold on to that thought. I want to come back to that point that you were making just after this ad break. Welcome back. We're having a discussion with Zahira Asmal, the founder of the City Project. Zahira, you were talking about our history, and with your research, you found that things are not what we actually learned in our history books. Can you share with us more that you found it was different compared to what we learned at school?
Yeah, absolutely. So I could point out 3 moments that I feel that Cape Town could have embraced its hybrid nature, because you'll know that since apartheid, we're quite fixated on this sense of purity. And there is no such thing as racial purity. You know, for millennia, people have moved across the world, and as people moved, they engaged with each other. So languages have merged, identities, who we are and what we look like, has also merged, our cultures have merged. There's no such thing as purity. But apartheid was constructed on racial purity, meaning that you would have also understood it, and dare I frame it this way, but Afrikaner people had this ideology which also mimics a Zionist ideology of that God has given me a certain right to be here in Africa, and I'm going to teach the savages and barbarians, but through religion, and this is how I'm going to transform a certain society. And so a tabula rasa was created in colonized places across the world. And in Cape Town, it was no different. The Khoi history and the San history was completely written out, not only through ethnic cleansing, but also through structures and their own histories, languages, their medicinal, the way they used medicine and plants to treat each other. All of this is written out of history. And so what you get a sense of as people as South Africa, that, oh, white people brought civilization to South Africa. But let me tell you that as long as two people exist in a space, there's civilization. There's languages being spoken, then there's an identity and culture there. And I've been across the Cape and in the Drakensberg and elsewhere where I've seen incredible art on rock art that the San and the Khoi people have made. So how is it that you can come to a place and say there was no civilization here? And so I feel like there are three moments in Cape Town's history where it looked away from its opportunity to embrace its hybrid. So in the 19th century, when British took over the Cape, because before that, the Dutch had colonized the Cape, and hence you can see the certain street names, the language. Oh, so let me just go back to a bit of a hybridization there as well. Afrikaans is a brown language. I'm sure all your viewers, I mean, me included, when I was a child, I had assumed that Afrikaans was an apartheid language. It was created by white people, and it also dehumanized us. I remember protesting in my tiny school against Afrikaans. I think a lot of people like you and me would have done so. But when I moved to the Cape, I learned that the first text in Afrikaans was in Arabic. And so, and I'm going to show you. So if you read this, if your readers can read this, it's actually in Arabic, as you can see, it's a letter, but you will be reading Afrikaans. And so Afrikaans is actually a brown language. It was created by the enslaved people of the Cape because they had masters from Germany, Holland, Britain, Belgium, and elsewhere. And so their common language is Afrikaans. And so the Afrikaans that is spoken by brown people in the Cape is Afrikaans, or that is the original Afrikaans. And of course, in the 19th century, with British imperialism, the Dutch people or Dutch Creole people that were here needed to push back against British imperialism and took Afrikaans, took words out of the lexicon that were Arabic, that were Indonesian and Indian and Khoi, and created the Severtaal, which, as you know, refers to the pure language, also referring to racial purity. And so, as I said before, there is no such thing. And if you go deep in the history of Afrikaans, it is brown, and it was made by enslaved people of the Cape. Also, what had happened at that point, at that juncture, when Dutch people or Dutch Creole people at that time were resisting, they were classified as white, and they were resisting British imperialism. A part of them assimilated to British imperialism, but the rest, as you know, in history books, had moved across the country in the Groot Trek, the big move. And also in history, we learned that it was pioneering Afrikaner people that did this. There were thousands and thousands of people, but actually there were 15,000 people only that moved from the Cape into the interior. And what the history books don't tell you, that most of those people were enslaved people and Khoi people that this group of Afrikaner voortrekkers had taken with them in order to do the hard labor along the way. But the history books we learned in primary school was that these were pioneering Afrikaner people, and it was just them. Even the mythology through graphic design and art is always depicting white people moving through the country. And so the other part that I feel that South Africa is missing out on its hybridity is that we keep talking about the rainbow nation of people, of these colors kind of, lying next to each other, and we should embrace our multiculturalism. But I feel that once I embrace that we are hybrid, that we are all mixed in some way, we will stop fighting each other about who is right and who is black and who is white and who is right. If we understand the history of how hybrid we are and celebrate that, then I think that is the way we should move forward. Finally, there's one part that really needs addressing in the Cape. So in 2003 and 2006, while excavating a piece of land in Greenpoint, which was my old neighborhood, a property developer found human remains, which turned out to be 5,000 bodies. And so there was a protest by local communities to keep the bodies resting in the space. But because we are in such an economic and political agenda in South African cities, the property developer exhumed the bodies anyway, and now they are sitting in cardboard boxes in an ossuary in Cape Town, next to a noisy coffee shop. So what that tells me and others that care about our ancestors and our history and our memories is that brown people don't matter. The enslaved people of Cape Town's history don't matter. And yet, if you look around you, the people that are descendants of Cape Town all have a history linking to slavery. And so why are we shying away from this history? Why are we turning away from this history? And so I encourage people through this work that we're doing at the C Project, with the C Project, is to engage with us, to learn more, to care about your history, pass it on to your children so we may know who we are and celebrate it rather than be ashamed.
Welcome back. We've been having an interesting discussion with Zahira Asmal about our history, and research that she found is different from what we learned, some of us, in school. So Zahira, tell me, in terms of academically, have you taken your points and your research that you found, have you taken it further with the South African government?
Yes. So what I do with all my projects is that when I conceptualize a project, I take it immediately to people that could partner with us and to, of course, our government, because although the work that we do is independent, I'm the sole owner of my agency, I work collaboratively, but the work that we do actually would inform how cities are made. So when I started the project, I went straight to the city of Cape Town. I went to the Western Cape government and also the National Department of Culture. But unfortunately, only one of these government institutions, which is the Western Cape Government Department of Culture and Sport, responded to our call for collaboration, which is very sad indeed, because this work is about Cape Town and South African citizens and people that wish to make South Africa their home. It also dismantles the legacies of apartheid and colonialism. So I'm really disappointed that our government is not engaging. However, we did get collaboration and partnerships with Dutch institutions and German institutions and the government itself.
And Zahira, the city recently held a workshop at the District 6 Museum Homecoming Center in Cape Town. Please share with us the discussion points and what was actually achieved at the workshop.
Well, I have to say, I am so pleased with this workshop. It was so much better than I imagined. So the point was, I mean, we collaborated, it was co-hosted with the District 6 Museum. And I think most of your viewers will know the history about District 6 and the displacement of 60,000 people over a period of just a couple of years to make way for white South Africans in the space. And so the collaboration with them was just a natural fit. So we hosted it there, and the questions that we wanted to address of bringing people together was, how can history help us to shape more inclusive futures? How may young people engage in intergenerational dialogue so that we may resist colonial and apartheid legacies in the present? And also, we wanted to talk about what real role that creativity can play in the democracy making process, and how may the young artists, architects, designers, and other creatives help us imagine more equitable futures.
And how was the response from the crowd? And have you been faced with concerned reactions?
Yes, it was so heartwarming. I have to say, I've been smiling like throughout the day and since then. The responses have been also heartwarming and engaging. And what I loved about it on that day, no one held back. We had a very diverse group of people that were academics, artists, activists, archaeologists, linguists, diplomats. They all came together and spoke very openly about those histories and the representation and spatial dynamics of Cape Town, but also drawing and writing themselves back into the city. And what we are going to do now is analyze all of those responses from the workshop, and then we're going to integrate it in our work moving forward.
And are there any future plans for the C project?
Yes, absolutely. Well, it's ongoing. We have an open call right now where we're inviting all Africans who are interested in making inclusive spaces in Cape Town. So it is focused in Cape Town, but of course, whatever you learn here, you will take with you from any place that you come from. So we've already have interest from different parts of Africa and South Africa. But so the open call ends this Sunday. And everything is on our website. If you go to icu.capetown, all the information for the open call is there. So please reach out, submit your applications, and we will be making a selection through May, and we will announce the successful applicants at the end of May, and they'll be joining us for a C studio. A studio is a week-long series of workshops, expert presentations, tours, publications, where we bring people together transnationally. So we're bringing people together from Cape Town's past and present to analyze the city and make proposals to be more representative. And that will be shared with the public over a weekend program.
Zahira, in terms of the transnational aspect, is there any support from abroad for the C project?
Yes, so I've collaborated with various Dutch institutions, which is Dutch Culture, the Creative Industries Fund. They are both institutions that have been funding our C project so far in the last couple of years. And then we have two partners, the Research Center for Material Culture, which is focusing on, as I said, material culture and museology. And there's the Het Nieuwe Institute, which focuses on design and architecture and digital culture. So they have partnered with us, and so whatever work we do here, we have them mirrored in Holland as well. So we've already hosted events in Rotterdam, in Amsterdam, and in The Hague. We are also working with the National Archive and the Rijksmuseum, and with the Dutch government here in Cape Town and Pretoria.
With all your interaction with the international partners, have you ever been asked to do research for their countries?
Yes, absolutely. I have done, so I've been conducting research in Holland already since 2017. And so whatever research we have, we will be sharing on our platforms. And of course, we will be publishing in the book that I am working on called I See You, which is really about acknowledgement and recognition and equal, obviously, recognition as all citizens. I have been conducting research in Holland. I've also done extensive research in Germany, because I feel that Germany has done really well in representing their history through memorials, through events, and through projects that they engage in.
From Germany and Holland, will you be working with other countries?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, of course, we are homebound at the moment because of COVID, but I do have plans to be in India and Indonesia and Sri Lanka as soon as I am able to travel safely. And then that is also work that I will share locally. In fact, for our C studio, we are bringing someone from India and from Indonesia, because as I mentioned earlier, most of the people that were enslaved and brought into Cape Town as hard labor were from India, Indonesia, Madagascar, and different parts of Africa. And so it is only like it's obvious that we should engage with each other and learn transnationally and share our work with each other.
And why these countries specifically?
Oh, yeah, as I just said, because through the time of the Dutch East India Company, when they had established their trading station here in the Cape and colonized the Cape, they had, I mean, for the life of me, why I couldn't understand why Dutch couldn't do the hard labor themselves. They had already had a station in what was called Batavia, which is Jakarta now. And so they had stations in India. Well, as you know, the spice route was very lucrative for the British and for the Dutch. And they had trading stations there, and they had enslaved people there. In fact, these countries had ravaged these Indonesia and India, and have created a lot of problems in these countries. And I don't know if you realize, but India was one of the richest countries in the world before Britain had colonized it. And so anyway, so to answer your question, the reason I focus on these countries is because people that were enslaved were brought from India and Indonesia and Sri Lanka to the Cape. So the identity of Cape Town, the language of Cape Town, is very much coming from these places. And so it is important that local people should know who they are and where they come from, why they speak certain languages, and also to dispel the myths that were told about their histories. And as I was saying earlier, most people are called Cape Malay, but they actually come from Indonesia and India. And this is all in the archives. It is not myth making today, but it was myth making from the National Party.
Thanks, Zahira. It was really great having you on our show, and we hope to hear more about your workshops that are going to be taking place.
Thank you so much. And also, just for your viewers, we have social media. So if you go to Facebook, The City Agency, you'll find information there. Our website, www.thecityagency.co.za, or the project website for the C project is icu.capetown. And of course, Instagram as well, The City Agency, as well as ICU_CPT. You'll find all the information on the open call and all our events, how to be involved, how to contribute. We welcome it. And thank you so much.
All the best, Zahira.
Thank you.